Yo, what's up everybody? Today I'm gonna be going over like just a devlog, um building a new lightweight framework to kind of, you know, speed up stages of development. Do just basically like, you know, framework things. Now, I built I built a couple of frameworks already that are privately used for like general game development, but they're kind of bloated in my opinion. So kind of switching it up with this one, trying to make it simpler to use and be more native to Roblox rather than uh how crazy like the learning curve on the main framework that used in all the games that I currently produce and that my studio currently produces. Um, so that's kind of the aim with this, just to kind of like make everything less bloated. Uh, so pretty simple structure. Uh, a server or service controller structure, as a lot of you are probably familiar with if you've used knit before. And some of it is using knit's packages. Well, I just have packages here that are popularly used, or at least I use a lot, and that are pretty nice, like Zone Plus, Trove from Slightnick, Signal from RBX Util, from Slightnick as well, like from his utility library, um, which is just a modified version of the original. Thomas from Aaron, Infinite Math for like infinite math, infinite numbers, and then this is a custom event bus, and then Concur, which is just from Slightnick. And then we just have libraries, profile service, UI labs, fusion, uh, then just type definitions you can find in here. Um, so the main focus on this is kinda to this. I mean, obviously, with every framework, it's to speed up development time, but I'm trying to make this a really user-friendly experience and not a lightweight framework in the sense that you're hardly even following like a framework structure, but a lightweight framework in the sense that it's going to be hopefully easy to pick up and you can kind of just feel at home when you're using it. Um, so the booting the booting structure of this, we're moving over to VS Code, Rojo or Rojo and everything right now. So um, but our booting structure is pretty simple. We have the client file and the server file. Server file obviously gets called when the server initializes, and it iterates through all the children in here, which are all the services in here, and it requires the service. And if there's an initialize function, then it calls initialize, and then it puts it into the initialized, and then if there's a start function, it starts it. Just a basic boot order. And after we do that, we resolve the promise and then parent our client file right here into replicated first. And what that does is whenever the client loads in, everything, uh, all the controllers get loaded. So you can kind of have a centralized area to work rather than having to, navigate all around for X, Y, and Z. You can just kind of have it all consolidated in a relatively close proximity. Um, and I'm prefacing this. This is like version like 0.1 of the framework. It's really new. really new in development. Literally started like 24 hours ago, basically. Uh, but I do have a good bit of experience doing these, so it's kind of easy to make decent architecture out for them in a fast time. But basically, it's the booting is at least promise based, and then the client booting as well as promise based, and then you can have load time stuff as well. But this is just temporary to um, have a print statement here to uh, just have a print statement here. Realistically, if you had any like anything like if you use replica service, you would do like replica controller request data, and then request the data for that after, and then it would be all synced up. Um, so general practices within this framework, they don't need to be followed, but you know, it would realistically be like a kind of component based where you have your server side and your client side, and if you need a class on here, you would just build out some class, and then you know it would be referenced right here, um, rather than like you having to go uh, reference in replicated storage and just kind of like navigate all around. No, this is just kind of basic stuff. Then components and configs, obviously the same thing. If you have any components in here, you do that and then require them in your main controller and load them up. Same for both of them, obviously. And then you could also just go for like a traditional approach and uh, not have like anything in there and just kind of raw dog it and make it work. Um, you also it is object oriented. You could do a modification to I mean actually I'll just add in dynamic detection for if it's a object oriented one or if it's not, and that way you guys can not have to worry about that. But you're probably seeing this strung around. I don't know. Really late right now. Apologies for my speaking. But you're probably seeing this thrown around, which is the dispatch, and you're kind of you might be wondering what that does if you're not, you know, you haven't used like an event bus before. Basically, what this does is in here we subscribe to this event, and then we have the parameters in here of what we basically want to pass through, which would be the payload. And the payload contains a message. So if we look in here, when we call our publish function, we pass in the event we are publishing to, and then we are passing in the data would be payload.message, and when we run this, we'll get received message hello world. So this allows cross communication across scripts, and previously we had a lot of dependency injection going around, but I introduced a basically dispatcher event bus kind of model to a game I was recently building into like an actually new version of my Studios framework. Um, and I realized that I could negate basically all the use for dependency injection, like injecting this controller into the test controller. I could basically negate all that with the use of a event bus, a global event bus. Basically, like basically by injecting the main dispatcher into all of the controllers, and then that way they can subscribe methods to the main event bus and then publish the message through another controller, and that way that basically negates any use for dependency injection or like the requiring a controller from another controller and running into like a cyclical dependency issue, which is really good because it will help make code cleaner and can do kind of like clean building with like example controller on like mount dispatcher, then just have that in here. Then in there initialize, obviously you just do like self mount dispatcher. Actually, I'm not connected to Rojo, but obviously this is the way you would do it to kind of clean up the initialize function. And although this is pretty obvious, the way this works is we have, sorry for the flashbang, we have the initialize function, which then gets, once it's initialized, it gets put into a table, and then this table gets called, and all the start functions, if they exist, they get called, and then it runs all the code. So it initializes, waits for everything else, so that way if for instance, if test controller, if we had publish in here and the dispatcher got mounted in this one, if example controller booted after test controller booted, then we would run into an issue with the event doesn't exist yet, so why, like, where are we sending the data to? So it's a basic structure, basic boot structure, but that's the overarching idea for it. It's gonna be expanded a lot on in probably like in the following month. It'll be expanded on, and I'll just kind of try to provide devlogs, and I'll link the repository in the description if you guys want to kind of follow progress or kind of look into it uh as it upgrades and as it gets better and better for the end user. And in the next week I'll start working on like a game to kind of show how you can build out a full game with the framework. uh so you know you can actually see practical application, how to use um how to actually like develop with the framework, because it might be kind of intimidating if you're not used to the style, and maybe you're used to, I don't know, it or something else, feels really uncomfortable trying to get into it. um some changes that'll be, or some additions that'll be getting added that are in my other frameworks, um are these kind of methods where you have self.client, which if you do use it, you'll be familiar with this. um so self.client, and then like function name equals function uh args. Yeah, actually it would be like layer. And this would be a remote function, and then in my other framework as well, we have remote event equals function player args, and if this just generates a remote event for you, and then you just kind of look at what parameters you'd put in here, and then it connects the callback if it's on here, and then on the client side these get referenced as well, and then on the client side you can, well, this is the client side, but if this was on the server, this is how you'd build it, and then on the client you would be able to do self colon function name and then pass in args. I don't know why I'm doing that. Oops. You'd be able to pass in args in here, and this would call this remote function just like that. And that's just prevalent in all my frameworks, and I'll show you use cases of that so you kind of have a more in-depth understanding of it. Let me make sure I don't like any indie. Okay, let me drag this up. Loads. And this is using the place I'm about to pull over is using a version of Lumina framework. So this is basically generating remote events. It would look like this. You have remote functions that get generated. And if we go into game and probably placement services idea, we look in here, we'll see we have self.client place item, self.client withdraw item, self.client get canvas, and then if we look into the client and look at place item, you'll see we have place item right here, which is getting called, and then it's passing the player automatically because it's a function, and then we have the object, and then the properties that we want to pass through. So that's basically how that works, and then the shared is basically the exact same. Obviously there'll be like documentation on it. I'm not going to go too far into and the last thing really to cover is just types. There's just a general file for your types. See, well, services don't have anything. We have like the dispatcher class, and then the example controller, which actually I don't even know why the dispatchers are in here. Probably well, actually just for type checking, but yeah, this is pretty much like the devlog one of the like shard framework. I'll be dropping some more updates the like coming days, but that's pretty much it. I just wanted to drop this to kind of just have this out here, and the GitHub repository will be linked in the description. But I hope you guys have a good day.